spot pie.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. When life gives you lemons, send it back and demand chocolate. Yeah, I look some of these up for humor stuff. Here's one. It says, if life gives you lemons, say thanks and sell them on Facebook Marketplace. If life gives you lemons, pretend that you're at a ball game, make lemonade and sell it for $8 a cup. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, we see that, we've heard that, you know, and it's, you know, it's pretty decent little tidbit. It's hard to, it's a lot easier to kind of grin at those than to follow it, isn't it? Because, you know, when things are going bad or going through some rough patches and stuff, it can be tough to take that type of attitude. But James is going to teach us today kind of how to approach stuff like that from a spiritual point of view, maybe change our thinking a little bit. And, you know, when we do find ourselves in the midst of trials, that we're going to be able to turn them into triumphs. So, would you say, like I said, I have it down here. I answered the own question right there. It says, is it easier to laugh at this than it is to practice it? And I think we said that. So let me look at it, go through another way. No, the term, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade, that's not a Bible verse, is it? But is the principle itself biblical? Find joy in tribulation. Do we have examples of people in the Bible that what we thought was defeat at first and turned it into triumph? Sure. A lot of them, aren't they? Of course, the main one's Jesus, isn't it? You know, Pharisees thought they'd won, hadn't they? Thought they had defeated him. Turned out that was the ultimate victory, wasn't it? But we go through. Here's one that sticks out to me because it's like one of the first Sunday school lessons I ever taught, and that was Joseph being sold into slavery by his brothers. Looked bad for him, didn't it? He wound up being, what, second in command in Egypt? Something like that? Moses. What about Daniel, who we just studied? Did he turn what looked like defeat into triumph? Victory? Sure. Job? Noah? I mean, we could list them a lot. We could list a lot of them, couldn't we? I mean, so James is, when we look at it right here, James, in the first part of James right here, gives us a guide on how to approach trials in life. And he's going to, he's going to give us what this author right here in our book calls, and this is, I got an electronic copy of the book, but it's called 4 Imperatives That We Need to Obey. And we see those headline right there. And as we start out right there, the first imperative is to count. Now, what if we're going to be counting? Well, let's get into that here in just a second. First thing right there, our outlook determines our outcome, usually. Outlook determines outcome, and attitude usually determines our actions. Outlook determines outcomes, attitudes determine our actions. Now, there's a lot of, for example, and I've shared this for a friend of mine, Richard. It's helped me a lot. There's one thing, if you're in the education business, you have to sit through sometimes a lot of meetings. A lot of meetings are technically really a waste of time. A lot of things that can be handled by a simple memo or a simple, but they meet. And I had bad attitudes about those meetings. And, sometimes I might say off maybe a sarcastic or two remark. I don't know, perhaps. But, I was talking to my friend, and he's like, Scott, he goes, you're just not, I wasn't telling about that, but he's just talking about kids in general. And it's your outlook. Outlook determines it, man. He goes, when you got to find, I guess it's his way of finding it, but what he told me was when you're in those meetings, you got to be selfish. And there's a wasp right there. Just landed in that bowl. Or the protector. What's that?
It's giving.
Yeah. As long as it doesn't give me its venom. But he said you got to be selfish. This is a good time to be selfish right there. And what you got to do is look at that meeting from the point of view is, what can I take, he says, what can you get out of it that's going to directly affect you? He goes, if you don't, he goes, you're going to have to be there anyway, so get something out of it. I'm like, I never thought of it that way. Now when I go to those meetings, I find myself a little more, like I said, it's a lot better experience for me because I try to take that attitude. Hey, what can I get out of this? He would use that with the athletes that he would work with. He's kind of a mental coach, kind of, if you're familiar with John Gordon and some of those writers. He's a certified John Gordon mind guy or whatever. But that's what he said. We're going to practice at 5 a.m. in the morning. What's the first reaction to every kid probably? He goes, well, what's your outlook though? He goes, don't look at it like that. He says, hey, we get it out of the way. We get it done. You got to get up early. You're going to have to do that anyway, so why not get something positive out of it? So it's kind of that same thing here and with our approach. So let's take a look here at, we got a few things here that now as we get to the spiritual part of this, in verse 2 of James chapter 1, it says, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations. Count it all joy when you fall into divers temptation. So, the first thing, we need to look at right there, when you fall into divers temptations, what's he meaning right there? When you fall into divers temptations. We're going to face trials. Does it say if? When? So that's a big thing right there, isn't it? It's not if, it's when, isn't it? We're going to face trials and tribulations. That's just part of it. And, and we can get into some of these are just from being human. We're going to get sick. People are going to get sick. That's part of being human and other things right there. Sometimes we have to go through stuff, when God tests our faith, and we're going to see that. But to kind of just get that, the word count kind of is, according to what I saw here, it's from the translation, it's a financial term that means to evaluate. To evaluate. So it says, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall in. So it says that word means to evaluate. It says Paul used it in Philippians 3 a lot. When we face trials and trials, we must evaluate them in light of what God is doing for us and not to us. So that's your attitude, isn't it? So many times it's, and I've said it, God, why are you doing this to me? You ever ask that question? Why me? And again, it's not easy. And, there's things that, I'm not saying that, but it's kind of giving us a way to get that. I think James is trying to teach us right here. We look in, kind of getting back into that, when trials are coming right here. So got a few other things there that are highlighted here by the author. John 16:33. This is Jesus speaking, I think. My memory serves me right. Yep, here it is. And this is Jesus says, these things I have spoken to you, that in me you might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Acts 14:22. Go ahead.
Confirming the souls of the disciples and exhorting them to continue in the faith, and that we must through much tribulation enter into the kingdom of God.
All right. And then finally we got 1 Peter 4:12. Trying to get to it here. If somebody's there, feel free to go ahead.
Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you.
Okay. So Peter's right there. It's like, hey, don't be, it's almost like, don't act like this is something, What was it says? Think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is tried to you, as though some strange thing happened to you. It's like sometimes we are shocked, aren't we? But we see right there, just in those verses, trials are coming. And we kind of hit on it a little bit last week, when, sometimes you got to think, I had the privilege last Sunday night, one of my players from Hackleburg at high school, he actually preached Sunday night, bro. It was his first message. He's answered the call. That's what he's going to do. And me and him had a real good conversation Monday morning in break, but, just talking about it. He came in there and we visited, and it was something, if you remember last week, we said that when you begin to grow spiritually, what can you expect? You can expect attacks from Satan, can't you? And, and he actually, just to kind of give him a shout out right there, he hit on that as well. He said, Satan's going to test immature believer. He's going to, and that's kind of what I put that down because that's kind of what I get from this is trials are going to help us mature in our faith. They're going to help us grow and mature in our faith. And, and there's some things here we're going to kind of get into about that, where getting tested by Satan, and then facing trials. But the question is, and again, we're going to ask this question a lot, but how can one have joy in the midst of trials? It's not fun to go through trials, is it? It's not fun, is it? Man, it's middle of the month, and we're already, it's a long time that paycheck. That's not fun, is it? It's not. And, I can still remember me and Frida, you remember when we had to roll quarters that time after our first month of marriage to kind of get a little, but it never felt, I think we were, weren't we, our insurance was like Farm Bureau or something, and you were Farm Bureau, and I can't remember, or Alpha maybe. Anyway, it never failed, and when we first started out, we was running a little short. Alpha would send out this dividend check. It's about $150, $200. Was it State Farm? I don't know who it was. Anyway, but it always arrived right in the nick of time, it seemed like. I just credit God just taking care of us. And that's the same way. A few times in the summer, I've been, it got late in the summer, I didn't have a teaching job. And, like I said, God's always, it's always taking care of us. But it's not a state you want to be in all the time, is it? But, but we see right there from those passages, it is the state that we're going to have to face at times. So how do we have joy in the midst of trials? And and that's
I think one thing is, I know that I used to think that joy means the same thing as happiness. It is not.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good point. I think that's a very common misconception. Joy equals happiness. What is joy then? For a Christian, what is joy for us?
Comfort, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, comfort. I don't think that's bad. Confidence. God's going to take care of us. And at the end of the day, what we talk about all throughout the study in Daniel, at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, where are we going to be? What's the final destination for us? Yeah, heaven. So, and we talked about it. Hey, this is just temporary. This is a temporary status right here that for something later on that's going to be eternal. So, but wrote down, and what our author right here, he says, how can one have joy in the midst of trials? And that's live for the things that matter most. Live for the things that matter most. And for us as Christians, what does that mean? What's the thing that should matter most? That's living for Jesus. And, so when you're approaching that attitude right there, then that's going to, that's what's going to help get you through it. And as I said, so earlier I said outlook drives your outcome. Outlook determines outcome, attitude determines actions, and our values determine our evaluation. Remember what count meant, evaluate. So, just kind of a little thing right here we need to remember. If we want to end with joy, you have to begin with joy. And some things here in this next little section right there as we get to, So let's talk about some of our values. If we value comfort over character, then trials are going to upset us, aren't they? If we value material over spiritual, then we're not going to be able to count it all joy. If we value the present over the future, then trials are going to make us bitter and not better. So there's just some of the things there, and I think you think about it right there. Material, being too material, thinking just living in the present, not thinking about our eternal future. Those are some good things right there. So when trials come, we should, give thanks to the Lord and adopt a joyful attitude. And we got to look at trials through the eyes of faith. Look at trials through the eyes of faith. And I think that's, those last couple of statements right there, because again, a lot of times we get wrapped up in what? And why me right now? We get caught up in that moment right there. And, if we really kind of get into it and it's one of those things, it's just like anything else. Think about kids. Like, I teach teenagers, If you ask them, one of my favorite things I used to do with my seniors is first day of class is, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Where do you see yourself 10 years from now? They don't even see themselves where they are 10 minutes from now, much less that. You get what I'm saying? But as you grow, as you kind of, what's that a sign of? As you start thinking about your future, that's your sign of maturity, isn't it? And that's one of those things where again, when we start quit thinking about our present, and again, I'm talking about adults now, Christian adults. When we quit thinking about the present, start thinking about the future, thinking about our material, physical well-being, and you start substituting that with spiritual, then now, you're changing changing your outlook on all that stuff. And as I said, outlook over determines outcome, attitude determines actions, and your values determine your evaluations. So I kind of like this because there's a lot of little catchphrases that like little culture things we would use in athletics and stuff. So there's a lot of stuff to it. So the question is, how can we rejoice in the midst of trials? And that kind of leads us to the second thing right there as we get into verse 3 of James. And that is, so the first one was count. The next thing is know. Know what? Well, let's get back to old James here. James chapter 1, verse 3. Knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. Uh-oh. There's that patience word again. Gets us, don't it? So what do we know? What should we know that it makes it easier for us to face trials? The trying of your what? What's it say there in verse 3? The trying of our worketh patience. So, faith is going to be tested. We've already determined that. So that's number one right there. And if you think about it, when did God ever test anybody's faith in the Bible? Got an example? Job, yeah. That's a pretty big test there. I sat there, I'd like to think I could do what Job did, but I had to be honest. What about Abraham? Was his faith tested? Think about his, But when God was doing that, or when God was testing their faith right there, what was his purpose on that? There are a few. And there are others right there. Those are just two off the top of my head. I need to jot notes down on that. So why would, let me ask you this. I mean, on the other side, does Satan tempt and test us? What do you think? Does Satan test us? What about the wilderness and Jesus? He tested Jesus, didn't he? So I figure if he's going to test the Son of Man, he's probably going to test little Scott, probably, don't we? So I think the thing there is, and gets into the know, when God tests us, or when God tests our faith right there, you think he's doing it for a negative outcome? No, it makes us stronger, don't it? Yeah. So it's for our own good. So when God tests us, it's to increase our faith. It brings out our best. Whereas when Satan's tests us, what he's trying to destroy us, isn't he? And that kind of gets back into it. So, and gets back to what I said, immature believers and things like that. So he wants to bring out the worst. Next thing, testing. Another thing we need to know, that testing works for us, not against us. So let's go back to that verse right there. It says the trying of your faith is translated to, the word that came from is actually translated to approval. So, 1 Peter 1:7 right there. I got one there. I like the fact that 1 Peter's right there, right next to, pretty close to James. 1 Peter 1:7. And the number's too small, I can't say it. That the trial of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perisheth, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. So trials are going to work for the believer. They're not going to work against us. And then finally, trials rightly used, trials used correctly, are going to will help us mature. And that's in Romans 5:3 and 4. Romans 5:3 and 4. And not only so, but we glory in tribulations also, knowing that tribulation worketh patience, and patience experience, and experience hope. And hope maketh not ashamed, because the love of God is shed abroad in our hearts by the Holy Ghost, which is given unto us. So what is, what does God want to produce in our lives right there? We can see right there, patience, endurance, the ability to keep going when things are tough. And it kind of goes back to the term. So I got right there in that next blank. When you think of, if you say someone's patient, how would you describe them? Calm. Long suffering, yeah. Was Job patient? I mean, that's got the patience of Job. But yeah, it's a lot of times I think, and this is what it says. It's a passive term, but it's a term of courage, perseverance in the face of suffering and difficulty. And so if we think about it right here, obviously immaturity is a characteristic of impatience, or the characteristics of immaturity. You got impatience and unbelief. Maturity is patience and faith. So they're completely 180s of each other. And here's something, and this author brought this out, and it's one of those where it was actually an aha moment in my almost 40 years of knowing Jesus. Why is patience, or why does God want to make us patient? So we can endure. And to endure, but also I think, and this is the thing. It is of course this person patience or endurance is a, like I said, I'm not getting into that yet. But here's the deal. The author says it's that patience is the key to every other blessing, because it teaches us to do what? How did Abraham mess up when he was promised a child? Yeah. He did it on his own timetable. He rushed God's timetable, didn't he? And this is something and I may be off, but when we are taught patience, we learn to wait on God. That really spoke to me. I hadn't thought of it like that. And then I got to start thinking, yeah, Abraham waits on God. Because how many times have we said God's timetable versus our timetable? When we go on our timetable, what do we normally do? So, I may be the last person in the room that's learned that. So when we learn, it teaches us to learn to wait on God to do great things for us. God's timetable is greater than ours. I got Abraham, and there's some other things there that the author mentions. So a few things here down there at the top of the back page right there, and it should start going by pretty fast here. Patience and endurance is built from difficulties and trusting God. And when we know this, it allows us to face trials joyfully, because we know what trials will do for us and do in us and for us. And the end result is going to bring, at the end of the day, what did all those trials that we talked about, Abraham, Joseph, Jesus, who did it bring glory to at the end? It brings glory to God. And when we start thinking of it in that terms as a Christian, it's going to change our outlook. So, and that's kind of, that's why it's important, that we study the Word, and when we study about Abraham, Moses, and David, and Jesus, we realize that there is a purpose in trials. So now that gets us there. We've count, which is evaluate, and now the next imperative is to know. The third one is to let. And that was pretty, and that's let God have his will with us. So as we go now, that's in verse number 4, is the key one here, and it says, but let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. So God can't build our character, without our cooperation. And when we submit, he's going to accomplish his will. And that's the one. And the next thing we see right here is what happens when we resist. What happens when we're going to resist God's will? Sometimes we get chastened into submission. I think Jonah, and I never learned this till Brother Nathan, I've heard him preach on it and stuff about Nineveh, and Jonah. All I knew about Jonah was a well. And then what his mission, understanding how he wound up there, that was big. Jonah, if you think about it with Jonah right there in Nineveh, he went, didn't he? But he didn't go at first. If you remember, he had to go through the well. And even after he did, what at the end of the account of him, he did what God told him to do. But did he face it maturely? Because at the end, what was he still doing? He still wanted God to bring the judgment, wouldn't he? So we see there that that we need to submit, to God, that that He can accomplish His will, and it's going to be a lot better. It's going to be a lot easier for us. So, and that's the thing. We get into Ephesians. I don't want to get into that just yet, but do y'all feel that even today that us as Christians that we try to shelter ourselves from trials? Seems like a natural thing. If you think, yeah. Oh well, I don't like. Like I said, I don't like it at all. Is it nature for humans not to like? We don't like change, do we?
No, we don't like discomfort.
Don't like discomfort either.
Trials,
No, it's not. And, when we say discomfort and trials, we're not talking about, hey, the air conditioner's out or, or whatever. It's talking about true stuff right there. So, yeah. But, and if you think, it's one of those where I don't feel like I'm an expert enough yeah, but sometimes we kind of shelter ourselves from, we try to, and it seems like that would be a natural thing to do, wouldn't it? But yet, and I'm not saying you're not supposed to go and just create your own, you're not supposed to create your own trials, are you? But when they do come along, just accept them with the right attitude and understanding that, that we know, or, if we let God have his will with us, then it's going to be all good. And so Ephesians 2 and 8 and 10, and again, very, as you look at that right there, let's see, let me find it here. For by grace are ye saved through faith, and not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works, which God hath before ordained that we should walk in them. And, 3 works, they're going, really, if you look at it, there's work that God does for us, work that God does in us, and work that God does through us. And what's the work that God, what do you think, what did God do for us? What's the ultimate thing he did for us? Yeah, salvation through Jesus. So it all starts there. We said last week, can't grow spiritually till you have the Spirit. So, it starts with being saved, salvation. Then the next thing, as God, as we go, work God does in us, and I have here, that's sanctification, which I had to ask that question before in the past, but that's the process where we grow to become as Christ-like as possible. I was having that, that's one of the things me and Daughtry was talking about right there Monday when we was talking about, because I always exhort my kids in my classes to what is excellence? Excellence is not making 100. It's not being perfect. It's doing your best. And I think that sums us up. We was talking about that I think that's what should be our goal as the life of the Christian. We can't ever be like Jesus, can we? It's impossible. But we should strive to kind of do the best we can to take as many steps as possible towards that. And then finally, work God does through us, and that's service. And and the key is for all of this is, we have to surrender our will to God. And that's the key for us to do this. So, and then in verses, it kind of gets into this a little bit right here in verses 11 and 12 of James, where he just basically, he talks about the rich man and the poor man right there. At the end of the day, that's whether we're poor, getting into the material, or even if you're rich materially, at the end of the day, we're all going to be the same if we submit to God, because we're all going to have blessings and riches that are spiritual and eternal. And it just talks about there how at the end of the day, let me quote it right here real quick. But the rich, in that he is made low, because as the flower of the grass he shall pass away. For the sun is no sooner risen with a burning heat, but it's whereath the grass and the flower thereof falleth, and the grace of the fashion of it perisheth. Also shall the rich man fade away in many ways. But it's talking about, goes back to verse 10 right there. It says, but the rich, in that he is made low, and it kind of gets into that where it says, let the brother of low degree rejoice in that he is exalted. And it says the rich is as well, but not in material things, but spiritual. So that kind of gets us there. So we have count, we know, we let, and then finally right here, my watch is dead. I'll be quick. I should be done. And that is ask. And that's verses 5 through 8 right there. That's the fourth and final thing. When we're going through, when we are going through trials, what should we pray? What should we pray about? What should we ask for? Understanding. Patience. What's that? Help. All those strength, endurance, grace, deliverance. And I think all those are on the right side. How do we get that? Because and the number one thing it says that talks about here is pray for wisdom. That's all those things fall. I think all of those fall on there. Because at the end of the day, now that we have counted, evaluated, we know, and we've let God have His will with us. We ask for wisdom. Because now, and again, realize we're talking about the attitude we should have when we're facing it, is let's don't waste the opportunity. We're getting a chance to mature. And so wisdom is what we want. So we won't waste the opportunity God has given us to mature. He helps us understand how to use circumstances for our good and for God's glory. So that's what we ask for. And then if we look right here, so let's read verses 5 through 8. It says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given to him. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering. For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea driven with the wind and tossed. For let not that man think that he shall receive anything of the Lord. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. So what to ask for? He tells us to ask for wisdom and to ask for it in faith. And we ask in faith and not in fear. And it just talks about the doubting believer. He's going to be like the waves of the sea. He's going to be up and down all the time. I just spent about 5 weeks teaching about waves in physical science, so the first thing I thought about was frequency and amplitude in that example. But on a serious note. But yeah, and the same, you're going to be up and down. And it's like a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways right there, just talking about how, when the way this author puts it, a double-minded man has got, he's trying to hang on to the world and trying to love God. You can't do it. Because if you do that, that's what he's talking about. So we got to let go. So it's going to be up and down. And so that gives us there. So the 4 things right there. Count / evaluate, let, and ask. Those 4 things are kind of the attitudes. And the conclusion right here, and it should get me done here with 10 minutes to go, despite some doubters right here, that it's this. And he ends this part of the chapter, or verse 12 ends with a beatitude. It says, blessed is the man that endureth temptation. For when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. So, blessed is the man that endureth temptation. And again, we got to realize that the purpose of the trials is for us to mature. And here's the thing, and I think sometimes, we get human beings, we're kind of selfish, aren't we? When we grow as Christians, what's besides help the benefit for ourselves, we don't think of it as a lot, but when we grow as Christians, that glorifies God, don't it? It glorifies God. So as we face so the question I have down there is, as we face trials, why have a joyful attitude? Why have an understanding mind? Why have a surrendering will? Why have a believing heart? And it kind of gets back, at the end of the day. And I can still remember when Saran Stacy came here and spoke. He had his, if you don't know his story right there about what he had to face trials. He lost his wife in a car wreck and stuff, and his kids too, wasn't it? Yeah. So his entire family. But and I still remember him up here, and it's just one of those things where it sticks out. But he said this. He says, it's about love, brother. He goes, at the end of the day, it's about love. And, and love, it's the same way here. We love God. He loves us. Love keeps us faithful to God, and love is the force behind these imperatives that James gives us to face trials in life. So, and I think that's, and like I said, I hope, I don't know about you guys, but the rest of these lessons like this, like I said, I was moved. We evaluate, we know, and that's the thing. And I've always been a why guy, and I think that's one thing I've always let, hey, why are we doing this, Coach? What, I think and I'm the same way. When I know why I'm doing something, I got a better attitude about it. There's no doubt about it. And then finally, to let God have His will with us, and then to asking for wisdom and asking faith. So that's kind of what we got right there. When when you face trials and things, it's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to mature. Didn't say it's pleasant, but as I said, it should help us. As if we'll change our thinking and how we approach it right there, I think it should help us as we face these tribulations and trials of life. So, all right. So, anyway, anybody else got anything? Appreciate everybody being involved there. Next week, it's the second half of chapter 1 is what the book covers. So hopefully I'll have the book for you, and then we should be able to go from there. But I like the lessons in here. They're just like that. They're very well organized, and they get to a point. And I think hopefully we're going to enjoy the study right here. Good? All right, we'll close with a word of prayer. Lord, again, we're thankful for this day. Lord, I'm thankful for all your many blessings, Lord. Lord, just thank you for your love for us, your patience with us, Lord. And Lord, as we learn today, Lord, just instill these things as we go through life, Lord, and face the trials and things, that we'll just take it as an opportunity to grow in our faith for you, Lord, and glorify you. Lord, be with us as we go through our worship service. Be with Brother Nathan as he brings our word, Lord. Brings the word, Lord, and give us the words we need to hear to grow, to mature. And Lord, be with each and every person here, and be with their families, Lord, in this week as people travel. Just watch over, give them safe travel, Lord. And Lord, let them feel your presence, Lord, as families gather throughout our country, Lord, in this week. Lord, again, love you. Thank you for your son, Jesus. Forgive us